Weakness detected in arms.
The Warhammer 40,000 franchise has been around over 30 years, and the games have never been far behind. With games like Space Crusade and Chaos Gate, they were doing well. The trend of making bank and good reviews in their strategy games kept going until fairly recently. That's when things got a little different. So the brand had done well with tactical and strategy games. However, despite being a perfect setting for it, they never made an FPS game. Unless you count Space Hulk Vengeance of the Blood Angels, and I don't. That's still more of a tactical game. It wouldn't be until 2003 that a true 40K first-person shooter was made. It would also be the only 40K FPS game for roughly the next 15 years. This was Fire Warrior. And right from the get-go, there's a lot strange about this. PlayStation 2 outlets were very positive on the game. Uncomfortably so. It was to the point I thought it was only on PS2, but no, it got a release on PC as well. See, it's right there. The only reason I found out was because a guy emailed me about it. After a quick search, it turns out the PC version's reviews were abysmal compared to the PS2. As far as I know, this isn't sold digitally either. On top of all of that, getting the game to start on a modern system is a challenge, and if you do, here's your in-game options. Audio levels. That's it. So first of all, I'm going to show you how to make this game playable at all. That's still a decision you might regret, but I can't stop you. First of all, the game has a launcher. Unfortunately, it hasn't been seen by modern human beings. This is because it appears to have issues with DirectX versions past date, which in computer years is basically going back to the fall of Rome. You could go back to that, or you can be a genius and just launch the exe from the CD or your image. You don't even need compatibility mode, so easy, right? Well, almost. Remember, the game has no in-game settings menu. It typically runs at a lower resolution, and I can't show you it. Whenever I try to put a clip of it in, it crashes a video editor, so this is the fixed version. Now, I haven't seen the launcher, but I've heard some nasty rumors about it. The good ones at least say that you could have changed your settings in it, so that means it must make a config file. After digging around, I found out how to make one in Notepad. These values are self-explanatory for the most part. Then I just save it next to the exe and it's good to go. At least that's what I thought.
The standard carbine of the Tau fires plasma pulse burst ammunition identical to that of the standard rifle.
I can't deal with this crackling. Maybe you were around back in the day when sound cards were really being pushed, and this is kind of a part of that. At first, I thought I could force it to use EAX, but that didn't help. Fire Warrior uses some kind of software effects, but maybe they didn't install right. Either way, I've got to get rid of them. So now the game has lost all the echo effects, but the audio is crisp and clear.
The lightweight carbine is a rapid-fire weapon, and also mounts a photon grenade. Before they were halted in the Dalith system, and a truce declared.
Much better. So Fire Warrior is running. That's a good start. I loaded the tutorial, which is surprisingly somber. It's nearly dead silent. Okay, let's hit the range. Oh my god, this weapon spread. The aiming also feels a bit like being in a bubble of jelly. This is especially weird because these are Tau weapons, which means I need to talk about Warhammer lore a bit. If you played with toys and action figures, you may have known about, or played with, that kid. You never wanted to play with that kid. Nobody did. That kid always had to be the best, and he'd make up rules to do so. My Iron Man is coming to fight you. Nuh-uh, because my John Cena has an Iron Man force field. This child grew up to work at Games Workshop. An entire school bus of these kids did, and they made their own factions for the setting. These kids were kept in check by an entity that I'm going to call the Supreme Kid. The Supreme Kid will somewhat balance the other factions, but make sure that his favoritist is the most important. He will smite down or devour the creations of lesser kids who challenge him. In the end, only he will remain. That should sum up why the setting is so ridiculous. I figure that most people watching this know at bare minimum that 40K is grimdark and sci-fi. Or maybe space fantasy would be a better description. If you know nothing about the setting, just picture this. Hulk Hogan is in a cathedral, and he's fighting the devil. Hogan is wearing about 50 trucks worth of metal. Also, the cathedral is the size of Rhode Island. And in space. Hulk Hogan is the Imperium of Man. They're the humans in this setting, and probably the most popular faction for that reason. At this time, the setting didn't really have good guys, just lesser shades of evil. The Imperium is a bunch of fascist fanatics, but if you're a human, they're your best chance for being alive for a while. When the Tau released in 2001, they were the good faction. Non-Tau players tended to dislike them for this, among other reasons. Their main trait was having very accurate, long-range weapons, and you know what? These are not those weapons. I don't know how to describe it other than the gun is drunk. I had to go back to the config and enable the auto-aim that I had turned off. Auto-aim being on is the default setting. The The cone of fire narrows a bit and the weapon tracks your target, and it's still pretty atrocious. This is the moment that I started to realize what I was in for, but I wasn't really ready. This is one of those games you can't play on hard until you beat it on normal, so that's what I'm stuck with. Let's check it out. Fire Warrior starts off with a cutscene of something happening. I'm not really sure what, but before you can find out, the Space Marines blow it apart.
Space Marines!
They kidnap somebody, and the game begins.
I remember how nervous I was before mine. Let me help you get ready.
I can't hear a word he's saying.
Working properly.
It's like the voice actor is actually calling from China.
Ammo check.
There's no way to change this. Is that him talking? Whoa, what? As far as games made after 2000 go, I think Fire Warrior might have one of the strangest soundscapes of all. I've played games that use stock sounds, but never just a phone dial. The thing is, at least the phone dial sound is clear. A lot of levels will just have these alarms blaring half the time. Please, just stop them. When the game gets quiet, that's when you realize why it was so loud. To hide all the sounds. What did he say? To give you an idea of how bad the weapon sounds are, one of the most powerful sounding weapons in the game uses a stock machine gun sound. Of course, like almost every other weapon in the game, the spread on it is horrible. At several points I couldn't tell what was happening because the sounds were looping over each other. Failing? Does this sound like being an event or opening a bag of chips? I understand working on a budget, but when you're taking field recordings of people opening snacks in a movie theater, it's not working out. Okay, the sounds are abysmal, I can accept that. But why does every Imperial Guardsman say that it's quiet? I am going to lose my goddamn mind. I'm only 15 minutes into the game and I can't remember what's happening. Wait, I beat it? 14 minutes? That felt like 14 weeks. To summarize it up, I'm just not very happy with the sound. Let's move on. The game is about as standard as it gets for first-person shooters. You go through multiple linear levels, find new weapons, and kill enemies. What I find interesting is that it's a kind of transitional shooter. Easy example, if you want to open the magenta door, you need to find the magenta key. Colored keys were a staple of 90s FPS games because, well, they make sense. You don't need a special narrative to understand what's happening. You see the blue door, you need the blue key. Easy. This practice largely went extinct in the early 2000s. With a big push for story in games, obstacles would have to be narrative related. Having a color-coded door and key was now seen as being too arcadey. Having the red door was now just seen as lazy. Okay, so Fire Warrior is more of a 90s game. After all, levels have a stats counter. From time to time you'll complete an additional task, and I'm not sure what they are because the game never really tells you. That checks out. There are also plenty of health packs, but wait a minute, something is still happening to my health. Man, it's just on the tip of my tongue, I can't remember what it is. Okay, so I've had to think about it a little bit, and it's a way worse Halo. I know all the advertisements that would kill Halo, but it's just a worse version of that game. You have to wonder how you can take a formula that was proven to work on a console like Halo and mess it up somehow. Then I looked at the games they were making before and during this, and their train simulators and iToy games, and it's like, oh, this makes sense now. To give the game some credit, it has a variety of 40K weapons. There are a lot of standard weapons you'd expect, like a sniper rifle, a pistol, and a shotgun, but there are some weapons that are a little more unique. Chargeable plasma guns, a plasma pistol, a melta-gun, the list goes on. There's about a dozen weapons to choose from. My favorite ended up being the bolter because, well, they got it right. You also carry a sword, but it might as well be a spoon. It's useless. It has close to no reach and it barely does any damage. I can't even imagine how bad this is on hard. I have three main issues with the weapons. The first is that several of them are redundant. The stub rifle is a good medium-range weapon with a muzzle flash that looks like a solar flare, but the las gun does basically the same thing. The bolter is fun to use, but then there's a chaos bolter which fires a little bit faster and maybe does less damage. I can't tell because, you know, it's a bolter. If you don't know the lore, it fires 75 caliber rocket-propelled explosive bricks that were blessed in a church. The chaos bolter does the same thing except, I don't know, the rounds are blessed at a Marilyn Manson concert. My second issue is that you can only hold 2 guns. Except in rare occasions, you're only going to find ammo for your weapons on dead enemies. So putting down a rifle in exchange for a pistol with only 6 shots doesn't make any sense. Doing that discourages a player from experimenting, but it gets even worse than that. One of the weapons you're holding has to be a Tau weapon, and they're terrible. So even if you find 2 weapons you really like, you have to choose one because one of them will have to be a Tau weapon. To make matters worse, you don't get the second weapon, the carbine, until the midpoint of the game. That means you're only getting to choose one weapon for most of the game. But there is the Tau cannon. Also, look out for death animations. It's like they all want to win an Emmy. So holding off for that seems good, except this scenario doesn't happen a lot. By this point in the game, you're going to be fighting some of the spongiest enemies around. Having this would have been great in some of the earlier levels when there were swarms of guardsmen. Here, it's just wasted. You do get a rail rifle in the last levels of the game, and this is when Tau weapons are good. The rail rifle can zap a bad man right into the Shadow Realm. Yeah, me too. It is not a prize worth waiting for, and I'll come back to why. While I addressed it earlier, the biggest problem is the spread and aiming system. It doesn't matter if auto-aim is off or on, these things go all over the place. Even when it's on, sometimes it won't lock on right. It also has a tendency to lock on to nothing before going to the right target. You might be thinking it looks so obnoxious, you should just turn it off, and I would, but this is the better option, even if that result makes the game play like a buggy rail shooter. This is with it on, and the rounds are still going way outside the reticle. Remember, this is the home-in cheat mode. If all the enemies were at mid-range, or I could always carry a long-range weapon, then I could turn it off. It's those long-range fights that make it a complete pain, because not everyone's running up to you with a chainsaw. Wait, what's wrong with his head? Well, I'm sure it's in the codex somewhere, but we don't have time for that. The weapons being buggy does fit the theme of the game, which is being buggy. From time to time, enemies will dream of a world of peace, and then they stop fighting. This wasn't a one-time ordeal, this would happen multiple times with multiple enemies. The enemies have an even higher tendency of going bonkers if you have allies around. Early in the game, there's a boss fight with a Valkyrie aircraft. Weapons didn't seem to affect it much. I knew you had to disable the intakes on it, but sometimes I'd get both of them and it would still stay up there, and I didn't know how to kill it. Then, a breakthrough came.
Well done.
It killed itself. I spent longer than I'd like to admit looking at this clip trying to figure out what happened. I can't recall a boss in a game that just committed suicide, but now I think I have it figured out. When the pilot gets angry enough, he says a prayer and writes something down in a manuscript. He then hands it to the tech priest who lives behind the launchers for warmth. This is when the grateful tech priest fires the missiles, as you can see here. After carefully studying the schematics, I realized something. You can see out the cockpit, but not from behind the launchers. So, to put it in short, he fired point blank into this pipe and blew himself up. That's one mystery solved. Next time I'll tackle the missing doors. All these problems explain the bad PC reviews. If you've seen videos I've made before, you know that I usually start with the visuals and maybe a bit of story background and then move on to the rest, but I've been assaulted by issues non-stop from the beginning. Let's be honest, even if the story's incredible, that's not exactly Game of the Year material. So this could just be a horrible, horrible port of a PS2 classic. So after making calls and exchanging some notes, I got someone to help me. So to see if this is just the PC version, I have internet celebrity 8-Bit Brody to talk about the PS2 version. Is it as good as they say?
You know, I've been a fan of the Warhammer universe for a while now, and I have fond memories of Fire Warrior. I never liked it as much as Halo, but I remember it being an enjoyable enough experience. Revisiting this game, however, has proven my memory to be an unreliable source, and I feel that I can no longer trust my former self with any future decisions in my life. Every glitch and sound issue found on the Windows version of this game can also be experienced on Sony's home console. There was even an additional auditory hiccup during the tutorial. The voiceover present in this section stalls when naming a button prompt.
Press the start button.
It's as though it's pausing to allow for different inputs to be stated for different versions of the game, made all the more strange by the absence of this voiceover from the PC release. The night vision is somehow worse, and I even discovered how to make my character fly using a ladder, in some sort of Douglas Adamsian fashion, by him seeming to simply forget how to fall. The most directly discernible divergence between the two games, however, are the controls. Let me give you a quick rundown. The joysticks are standard shooter affair. R1 and R2 are primary and alternate fire respectively. Circle is reload, pressing square swaps weapons, and X is your use command. Triangle, though, gets a special scenario mapped to him. He lobs grenades. Why wouldn't they make that one of the L buttons, you ask? Well, let me tell ya, L1 is how you jump. And L2 is reserved for crouch, because of course it couldn't be on L3, that snaps your view into a level position, as was requested by every post-Halo console first-person shooter fan. Luckily, they let you change it in the options menu to this. So, that's good. Going back and playing this, it's very hard to believe that a game was released with controls this poorly optimized 2 whole years after the first Halo hit store shelves, and only 1 short year before this very console had its own dedicated FPS in Killzone. Other games of the same era were able to implement far more ergonomic and sensible control schemes, so I have a hard time excusing the faults of Fire Warrior with age. It honestly feels like the developers, not dissimilar to my absent father stumbling into our basement and discovering my uncle teaching me all the wrong ways to use a garden hose, just didn't care. If you care, however, feel free to come to my channel and subscribe.
Brody.
I also have a Patreon where you can donate money to help feed me.
Brody,
I'm very poor.
Alright, we got it. Alright, so it's just as bad on PS2. I'm not sure if that makes me feel better or worse. I should talk about something positive. The technical graphics are average to subpar for the time, and the levels did remind me of Red Faction a lot, but if you're into the Warhammer setting, there's some pretty neat stuff to see. Despite all the problems it had, the art team really did their homework. There's a level that takes place on an Imperial ship and you can really feel the size of it. Visit the study, the recovery ward, the kitchens, this guy. It has the most overdramatic Windows Vista handbook and out of order sign you'll ever see. If you wanted an FPS game where you could walk around the Warhammer 40K world, this was your only option for a long time. I gotta give them credit, they did a great job at it. I could see people having fond memories of this game. They might not remember how bad it got, but some of these images alone could stick with you. It's a downright shame that the level design itself is so bland. There were so many moments I thought it would get better. During a bunker level, I found a chair that had a bolter sitting on it. I knew what that meant. It was a cool way of teasing that Toyotas Maximus was around the corner ready to fight me. It was a good use of the environment telling a player about an obstacle coming up. That's a lot better than I can say for the rest of the game. They'll use the same lines over and over again.
Destroy this. You must obtain the keys. Find the button. This is the place. You must destroy this.
For everything it does right, it does 5 things wrong. It reeks of something that was either on a tight budget, a short time frame, or both. There's lots of clues that QA and testing was minimal. There are bizarre inclusions that just feel unfinished, like an Ultramarine stealth section. It lasts maybe 30 seconds.
What was that noise? No activity.
I did it.
Surveillance camera?
Nowhere is this clearer and more frustrating than the final levels of the game. Honestly, up to this point, there are very few story beats to speak of. You fight the Imperium and you save a hostage. Like a different FPS game, they start teasing another threat. Remember how I mentioned that Space Marines and the Human faction are very popular in 40K? Well, the story gets going, but it's centered all around them.
Greater threat.
A cancer, Admiral. A tumor to be removed. Ah, here comes the Tau representative.
You've come onto their ship, and you've killed a Mormon Tabernacle choir's worth of guardsmen and Ultramarines. They capture you in the middle of your slaughter, and then they let you go.
Head that way, Tau. The captain is waiting.
The evil forces of Chaos show up and do their thing. The Ultramarines then arm you, and the rest of the game is spent helping them to defeat Chaos. Talk about a 180 in motivation. Chaos have the beefiest enemies in the game. They also carry the most deadly weapons. Alright, that's reasonable. They're the endgame enemies. So what could they do to make this unbearable? Well, they can spawn right next to you with rocket launchers. These guys can pop up at any time. Chaos Sorcerers can show up without warning, and they can teleport more. Chaos is here, and their favorite activity is teleporting behind you. Once you know where they spawn from, it gets manageable, but I'm not sure this is even trial and error. The checkpoints also become further apart, so you might have to go through long stretches of button pressing and ladder climbing all over again because you got dropped by a rocket launcher. I always thought Chaos Raptors were called Raptors because they could fly and had kind of predatory bird-shaped armor. Well, the sound guys had a different interpretation. By that I mean they run at you making bird noises. I'll be honest, I'm at such a breaking point right now. Oh, please God, no, not again. What? Okay, I'm just gonna say that this goes on for a while, and longer than it needs to because of, well, you know. So after walking through Tim Burton's Candyland, we get a boss.
The seed of chaos in me. Severus is trying to transfigure himself by binding with a demon. He's trying to become immortal.
Okay, this goes on for a while, but it dies. Finally, you get to face the real final boss. What he's saying isn't important because I can't hear it because it sounds like he's on a speaking spell. This also goes on for a while. Sometimes my missiles go through him. Oh, it's over. The Tau and the Space Marines are all friends and the game is over. It's actually a fairly short game, but that final stretch really pads itself out. It's not the worst game I've ever played, but very subpar. If it got a digital re-release with a sound overhaul, some bug fixes, and a 4-weapon limit, I'd probably say it's worth checking out if you like the setting. As it is, you're having to jump through a lot of hoops for a very mediocre experience. I'm not good at formatting wikis, or else I would put this there, so I'll link my config file in the pinned comment until someone puts it up on there. Ultimately, Fire Warrior is a curiosity. It's an interesting example of two completely different design philosophies clashing together. At the same time, it's an excellent example of an outlet hyping up an exclusive purely because it's exclusive. That's it for me. Tune in for the racing game video. Kind of racing.
Disobedience, huh? That's a mistake.